Just last week, a man in a grease-stained cap stood at my counter, wincing every time his brake pedal chirped during my test roll. He had already priced a full brake job online before he walked in. That is how scared this sound makes people, and that is exactly the fear I want to take away from you tonight. My name is Roy Callahan. I run Callahan's Garage on Route 9, the same shop my grandfather opened in 1962. My father worked under that lift before I did. I have been under more cars than I can count, and I want to tell you about the sound that brings more people through my door than anything else. It is not the check engine light. It is not the grinding sound that means real trouble. It is the squeak. The high, thin, embarrassing squeak that happens every time you tap the brake pedal at a stoplight while the car next to you looks over. Most people think that sound means their brakes are dying. They picture metal on metal, sparks, a tow truck, so they panic. They come in and they say, "Fix it, whatever it costs." And here's the part that used to bother me early in my career. I would replace pads that had 80% of their life left. Good pads. Pads that did not need to come off the car. I charged good money for work that did not need doing because the squeak scared people into it. And honestly, because nobody taught me any different. My own father did this too, for years, because that is what the trade taught him. It took an old mechanic named Duke Ferris, a man who trained my grandfather, to sit me down and show me what was actually happening under that wheel. He was 79 years old the day he showed me, and what he showed me changed how I have done brake work for the last 18 years. I still remember standing there feeling foolish, holding a brand new brake pad in my hand, watching him prove to me that the old one I was about to throw away had done nothing wrong. Quick word before I go further. The old methods my family uses, there is more of it than fits in any one video. I gathered the whole of it into a book you can buy in our pinned comment below. The book is the long version. If you want it, it is there. I will not mention it again. So, let me ask you something before we go further. If the squeak is not about worn-out pads, then what is it about? Because once you understand that, you will never pay for an unnecessary brake job again, and you might just fix the one on your car tonight for free. Here is the truth almost nobody in my trade will tell you for free. A brake pad squeals for one reason, and one reason only: vibration. When you press the pedal, that pad presses against the spinning rotor at somewhere around 1,000 cycles a second. Under the right conditions, that contact starts to vibrate at a frequency your ear can hear, the same way a violin string sings when you draw a bow across it just right. The pad is not wearing out. It is singing. And once a pad starts singing, it will keep singing until something breaks that vibration up. Think about a bell. A solid bell rings for a long time after you strike it, because nothing is stopping that vibration from traveling through the metal. Now wrap a rag around that same bell and strike it again. The sound dies almost instantly, because the rag is soaking up the vibration before it can turn into sound waves in the air. That is exactly what the grease on your caliper hardware is supposed to do, and exactly what the soap on the back of your pad is supposed to do. They are not preventing the pad from touching the rotor. They are stopping that contact from turning into a ringing bell inside your wheel well every time you brake. Here is where the industry gets it backwards. The average shop looks at a squeaky brake and reaches for a parts catalog. New pads, sometimes new rotors, sometimes both. $200, $300, gone. But 9 times out of 10, those old pads were not the problem. Glaze was. Dust was. A missing dab of grease on 2 tiny metal clips was. The fix was never in the parts bin. It was in things you probably already own. Let me explain the glaze first, because this is the piece most people never hear. Every time you brake hard, or ride the pedal down a long hill, or sit and stop and go traffic on a hot day, the surface of your pad gets cooked. That cooking hardens the outer layer of the friction material into a smooth, glassy shell. That shell does not grip the rotor the way soft new material does. It skips. It chatters. It sings. New pads do not fix that if the rotor itself has picked up the same glaze, and a shop that only sells parts will never mention that a 15-minute cleaning could have solved it. The second piece is the hardware. Every disc brake has small metal clips and pins called caliper slides and shims. Their whole job is to let the pad move freely and to soak up vibration before it turns into sound, the same way the padding under a rug keeps your footsteps quiet. When those clips dry out, rust up, or lose their grease, they stop absorbing anything. Every bit of vibration goes straight through, and straight into your ears. Duke used to say the hardware is doing 90% of the quiet, and everybody blames the pad. Let me tell you about Linda Ferris, no relation to Duke, though she used to joke about it. She drove a 10-year-old minivan into my bay 2 years ago, already holding a printed estimate from another shop for $340 in front pads and rotors. Her brakes had started singing every morning on her drive to work, the exact kind of high-pitched squeak we are talking about tonight. I pulled the wheel off before I said a word about her estimate. 11 millimeters of pad left on both sides, practically new. I did the whole process right there while she watched. Maybe 25 minutes total for both front wheels. She drove out of that bay for the cost of a shop rag and a smile, and she has been squeak-free for 2 years since. That estimate is still in my filing cabinet, because every time I second-guess whether this trick is worth teaching, I pull it out and remember what almost happened to her. So, here's exactly what I do. In the order I do it, and every bit of it you can do this weekend in your own driveway. One more thing before the steps, because I get this question every single week. If your brakes only squeak first thing in the morning, or after the car has been sitting overnight in the rain, and the sound goes away after your first 2 or 3 stops, that is not the same problem we are solving tonight. That is surface rust. Rotors are plain steel, and steel rusts even overnight, even in a dry garage, from nothing but the moisture in the air. That thin rust film wipes off the first time the pad grips it, and the sound disappears completely for the rest of the day. Do not chase that sound with soap or grease. It is not a problem at all. It is just physics, and it costs you nothing but a few extra seconds at the first stop sign. What we are solving tonight is the squeak that follows you all day long, at every stop, whether the car has been sitting for 5 minutes or 5 hours. That is the vibration squeak, and that is the one with a real fix. Step 1, and do not skip this one. Before anything else, check your pad thickness. Most pads have a wear indicator, a small metal tab that will screech loud and continuous, not squeak, when the pad gets down to about 3 millimeters. If your pad is at that point, this is not the fix. That is a real safety issue, and you need new pads, full stop. I am not going to pretend otherwise for the sake of a good story. But if your pads still have meat on them, a 1/4 inch or more, and the squeak comes and goes, keep going, because you are exactly who this trick is for. Step 2 is the cleaning. Pull the wheel off, and you will see the caliper sitting over the rotor like a clamp. Spray the whole assembly down with brake cleaner, the kind that comes in a can for about $6 at any auto parts store, and let it drip off. This strips the road grime and brake dust that builds up on the rotor face and on the pad edges, the same dust that is feeding that glaze we talked about. Do this to all 4 wheels while you are down there, even the ones that are not squeaking yet. Step 3 is the pad edge. Pull the pads out. It is usually 2 bolts holding the caliper on, and take a metal file to the 2 leading edges of each pad, the edges that meet the rotor first, as it spins. A few strokes, just enough to knock off the sharp corner and put a very slight angle on it, what my grandfather called chamfering. That sharp factory edge is often the exact point where the vibration starts, the same way a perfectly flat reed makes a clarinet squeal until you round the tip. 30 seconds a pad, 4 pads, 2 minutes total. Step 4 is deglazing the rotor itself, worth doing if the squeak has been going on for months. With the pad out of the way, take a piece of fine sandpaper, something in the 400 grit range, and go over the face of the rotor in a circular motion, not back and forth in straight lines. You are not trying to remove metal. You are trying to knock the glassy shine off the surface and bring back a slight texture the new pad material can actually bite into. 30 seconds a side is plenty. Wipe the dust off with a rag and hit it once more with brake cleaner before you put the pad back in. This step alone, done on its own, has fixed squeaks for me that nothing else touched, because sometimes the glaze is worse on the rotor than it ever was on the pad. Step 5 is the one that surprises everybody, and it is free if you already own a bar of soap. Take a plain bar of soap, nothing fancy, dry, and rub it firmly across the back metal plate of the pad, the flat steel side that never touches the rotor. Never the friction material, only the metal backing. That thin waxy layer works the same way as the anti-squeal paste the parts stores sell for $8 to $12 a tube, damping the vibration before it can travel from the pad into the caliper and out into the air as sound. Duke swore by a plain bar of ivory soap specifically, and I have never had a reason to argue with a man who spent 60 years under cars. Step 6 is the hardware, and this is the one shop after shop skips because it takes patience, not skill. Take those little metal clips and slide pins, clean them off completely, and put a small dab of high-temperature brake grease on every point of contact. The slides, the clip edges, the back of the pad where it touches the caliper bracket. A tube runs about $7 and one tube will last you years. This is the step Duke said fixes 90% of the squeaks that come through a shop door, and it is the step that costs the least and gets skipped the most. One caution here because I take this seriously. Whatever you do, keep the soap and the grease away from the actual friction surface of the pad, the rough side that presses against the rotor. That surface needs to stay bone dry and clean to do its job of actually stopping the car. Soap or grease on that surface will not help your squeak, it will hurt your stopping power, and that is not a trade I am willing to make for a quiet ride. Only the flat metal backing plate gets the soap. Only the hardware and slide pins get the grease. If you keep those two rules straight, there is no version of this trick that puts your safety at risk. Put it all back together, torque your lug nuts back down, and take it for a slow drive around the block, tapping the brakes gently the way you would at a stop sign. Most of the time, the sound is gone before you finish the block. If one wheel is still talking to you, it usually just means that wheel needs a second pass on the soap and the grease. 15 minutes more, tops. Here is everything this takes. Laid out plain. A jack and a lug wrench you probably already have. A $6 can of brake cleaner. A metal file, the same one that lives in most junk drawers or toolboxes. A bar of soap from your bathroom, the kind you already own. A $7 tube of high-temperature brake grease, the only real purchase in the whole process if you do not already have one on the shelf. A folded scrap of 400 grit sandpaper, less than $1 at the hardware store, if the squeak has been going on long enough to need it. Total cost for a family that already owns basic tools, somewhere between $0 and $13. Total time, 20 to 40 minutes for the whole car, depending on how many wheels are singing. No lift needed, no special tools, nothing you would have to borrow from a neighbor or order online and wait a week for. Everything sits within arm's reach of most kitchens and garages already. Now here is the bigger picture, because this was never really about the noise. A brake job you did not need is money that could have gone towards something that mattered to your family. $200 here, $300 there, year after year, for a sound that a bar of soap and a tube of grease could have handled in your own driveway. That adds up to real money over the life of a car, money most people never think twice about handing over because the sound scared them into it. There is something Duke told me the same day he showed me that first pad, something that has stuck with me longer than any brake trick ever could. He said the difference between a good mechanic and a great one is not what they know how to fix. It is what they are willing to tell you does not need fixing at all. That kind of honesty does not show up on a balance sheet, not right away. But it is the reason Callahan's Garage has customers whose parents were customers and whose grandparents before them brought their cars to my grandfather on this same lot. Trust is slower to build than any brake job, and it is worth more than any single sale ever could be. So here's what I want you to do tonight, or this weekend at the latest. Pull one wheel, just one. Clean it, chamfer the pad edge, deglaze the rotor if it needs it, run the bar of soap across the backing plate, grease the hardware. Put it back together and drive it around the block. Come back and tell me in the comments whether that squeak is gone, and tell me what kind of car you were working on. Next time, I want to show you the trick Duke taught me for a squeaky serpentine belt, the kind every parts store will try to sell you a new belt to fix, using nothing but a bar you probably already keep in your bathroom. It sounds just as unlikely as this one did. And it works just as well. Until then, keep your pads thick, keep your hardware greased, and remember, the loudest problems in a garage are usually the cheapest ones to fix. Duke is not around to see how many driveways this trick has traveled to since he taught it to me, but I like to think he would get a kick out of it. Somewhere out there tonight, a garage full of strangers is about to go quiet, one bar of soap at a time.